talking about the SDR role in general.
So they're like, I don't like to read. I had to read all these books in college. Like, I don't want to do it anymore.
They're really interested in understanding what are those customers, how we deliver value to those customers, and how those deals convert.
Show the prospect that we're thinking about them because they're the hero of everything.
That's going to be a huge motivation for them, understanding that I generated this key client for the company that brings multi-million-dollar deal for us right now.
If you have the passion for SDR, be that.
So I have an SDR who is an appointment setter, and then I have a sales exec who actually takes calls. And it is sad very often that the handoff process is frustrating for a lot of prospects. So they usually want to talk to the same person they agreed to have a call with. But then when they show up for the call, it's totally different guy, right? Even though that person was already introduced. So have you used to do the same process of the handoff, and or do you think that sort of like having sales exec doing both the appointment generation and closing and demos and all that is important? Or, what is sort of like the best handoff process there for the prospects not to be frustrated?
Yeah, definitely. I think, in the process of like making sure that the prospect is aligned on what we're trying to do, right, in the appointment setting area, we have to look at that interaction. And so as an SDR, and like best practices that I've seen work really well for me and, my team in the past is, you set it on that call. They're like, hey, you get the interest, you set the meeting, you find the time. In that call, you let them know like, hey, like, I appreciate your interest. I'm going to set you up with, an account executive's name. And then right afterwards, you introduce the prospect and the account executive in an email, so that they now have an open line of communication that you don't have to worry about. So now that the account executive can say hi, they can introduce themselves before the meeting. And then before that meeting takes place, they're already building a relationship, which helps, eliminate that barrier of friction between the prospect now talking to the account executive. I think that's kind of the best practice that I've seen work really well for teams that I've been on.
I also know that there's a practice where SDRs actually get on a quick call to qualify the prospect, kind of talk shop a bit, sort of like explain the value proposition. Did you guys use doing that as well, or you more like qualify prospect without actually doing an actual introductory call or a demo per se?
Yeah, I think I see it both ways, right? So, cold outbound, you qualify on that call before you set the meeting. You don't set up the next step. I think you kind of look at it as like, the SDRs are still working through their growth stage into that kind of face-to-face. A lot of SDRs are nervous to hop on a Zoom call and talk to a prospect, right? They don't want to mess anything up, or the AE is going to be a bit more seasoned on that. So at one point, I think inbound's a great way to help transition SDRs to that. So when you have an inbound come in, that's where that SDR can set up that intro call and really kind of, suss out what's going on, what they're looking for, if they're qualified, have that conversation, because it's less high stakes, right? They're warm, they're coming in, they're interested in talking to the SDR. So it takes the pressure off. But in that cold outbound situation, just qualifying them, building that interest and getting them primed for that AE, I think that's kind of the best steps to separate that, but also help that SDR grow still. So inbound, help them grow, help them set up that call, let them do their thing. But on cold outbound, just let the AE handle it, because they're going to be more confident going into that to kind of walk that prospect through those next steps.
Yeah. And AEs are trained for that, right? So they go through the training where they kind of go through the different stages of the demo call and introductory call, and sort of like, know how to talk shop with prospects to, to pinpoint some of those points and so on and so forth. Okay. In terms of actually setting up a call, do you usually, when you were an SDR and your teams, do you guys qualify prospect by asking some qualifying questions? For example, I say, hey, John, before or while I'm sending you over the calendar invite, can you answer this question for my team to tailor the call accordingly? And then they asking some questions. So what is the typical sort of like extra qualifying process that an SDR can take to vet the opportunity or to make it more relevant for the AE to jump to?
Yeah, definitely. I think, extra qualifying questions only strengthen that initial conversation that we're going to have with the prospect. So, understanding, depending on what industry you're in and who you're talking to, like, is it leadership? Is it middle management? Who is this impacting? The qualifying questions have to, you have to know, the important steps of like what that person is going through. So having additional qualifying questions, I think, is very important, especially once you have a defined ICP. So the SDR should be asking those questions on the phone before they set the meeting. But if it's all through email, that's okay too. I think just a simple list in that email that's going out with a calendar invite on it of, hey, can you answer these questions quickly before? It will help us build, value around your issue, so we know how to, show you what would actually be impactful. So we're not just wasting 30 minutes of your time talking about something in our product that's not going to be as impactful as, X, Y, and Z. I think that's a really powerful way to show the prospect that we're thinking about them, because they're the hero of everything, right? So we're taking their hero's journey with us a step further by really digging into how we can help them out.
Yeah. Do you guys usually have SDRs attending actual calls and demos and being part of the conversation, or you don't, or that's not the rule of thumb, basically?
Yeah, I think the rule of thumb is not, right, because we're really hyper focused on generating top of funnel. So if an SDR is taking time to sit on calls, it's taking away from their ability to build that top of funnel. However, I think it's really going to be dependent on the SDR's tenure, right? So
Right.
like newer SDRs have to focus on getting the basics down, have to worry about, understanding, who they are in this role, where a senior SDR that's doing really well hitting quota should be proactively taking those steps to sit on calls, because they should have better time management, right? So they should know their day. They should be able to sit down in a meeting with an AE and a prospect and sit in and listen and still get all their stuff done, because they're more streamlined in the process. So I think it's going to be based on tenure. And I've seen my most successful reps, I actually encourage them, like, hey, once you're a senior SDR and we're looking at your promotion path, you should definitely be sitting on demos and definitely be sitting on introductory calls, so that you can get the flow of what's going on. So when you're interviewing for the next AE position on our sales team, you know what is expected. And so I think that's how I look at it. The older you get in the role, the more tenure you have, the more freedom you have to do those additional tasks, because you should be able to do it at that point.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. And for SDRs, is it always important for them to have that career growth into AE or whatever, or you had worked with SDRs that were just SDRs and they loved the work and that's it, so they didn't want to have that extra pressure of being like a phase role in the team where you talk shop with customer? Because again, every time you meet an SDR, obviously, it's different case by case, right? However, very many people starting in this role think that SDR is just a kind of the foundation or the starting point of the sales career, although the SDR might be just a career itself when you grow as an SDR, right? So what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, that's a really interesting. So I've run into a few career SDRs. They like the consistency of it. I would say like the majority of people, like you spoke to, see this as like a stepping off point into a sales career. But there are a few out there that look at SDR as a full career, and they're becoming really, really detail oriented on how they're doing their job. And I think that's really, really cool. So for me, like, I love sales development. I was an AE, SDR manager, SDR. And I love the sales development part of it. I love the strategy behind it and how we're going after things. And so for me, seeing more and more people end up wanting to just stay in seat and be really good at sales development and setting meetings, and having the freedom to do what they want in their role because they're so good, is going to be more commonplace. I think that we're seeing this across teams, especially as we have gone remote in 2020. Right. You'll find a lot more career SDRs. So I don't think it's going to be as uncommon as it was in 2018, 2019. And I think both directions you want to go are great. If you have the passion for SDR, be that.
Yeah.
be that, right? Like get after it and love it and crush your goals. But if you want to go to marketing or, sales proper or customer success, like take the steps to do that as well. But don't think, I think the mindset of SDR is only temporary, is no longer a mindset that people should have. Like do what makes you happy. And if setting meetings and having a consistent schedule and a grind makes you happy, get after it. Let's go.
Yeah. I think people that work in marketing or in content, they can spend like years, holding the same role, right? They don't necessarily need to go from marketing into being like chief marketing officer or whatever. You just be a marketing person, right? The same way you can be just an SDR. But how would you motivate the SDR? What should be sort of like the SDR, either compensation plan or a motivation plan for the SDR to be able to be comfortable in the role? Should it be just connected to how many appointments I book per month, or how many of those appointments going to convert into closed deals? This forever ever question of should SDR be motivated for how many appointments they book, or should they be compensated based on how many deals we close? Because if their appointments wouldn't convert into closed deals, then what's the point?
Yeah.
So can you share any thoughts here? This complicated one, right?
It's hard to judge that, right? So how I look at like SDR compensation is realistically like the time that you have to put into the prospects you're going after. So I think a fair compensation plan for in my mind, having gone through a couple dozen different SDR comp plans as they change around to see what's best is who are we targeting? Like if you're working with only enterprise level clients, like your base should not be the same as someone who's setting 100 meetings a month working with small businesses. Just the opportunities are far less. So I think it's going to be like, total compensation is based off of vertical, small SMB, mid-market, enterprise. And then once we have that base, figured out, I think a great way to look at compensation extra or variable would be meetings booked per month. And if they're moving to the demo stage, I think if the actual meeting is a qualified meeting that the sales, account executive is saying, hey, take this in my pipeline. This is a sales accepted lead. So SAL, that counts. If it doesn't make it to SAL, well, we're not really setting up the sales team for success. And so that shouldn't be counted. So I think that's a good way to look at it. And then there should be multipliers after you hit goal. I think that's a really good way to motivate people to set quality meetings and more than just their goals. If you start putting multipliers on top of what that extra money is, because people can put a calculator together and you can see like, hey, if I set 5 meetings over goal, it goes from $2,000 to $3,900 or $4,000. It doubles. Like that's crazy, right? So I think that's a good way to look at it. Again, very complicated question based off of industry and vertical, but I think having multipliers, just like AEs have multipliers when they hit goals and they sign multi deals and that kind of thing, is important for SDRs. That would be like the ultimate comp plan. But at the end of the day, I think deals closed too, they should get a little extra off of that because that's a good thing. If you source a deal that goes all the way through and closes as well, having a little extra comp,
like a small percentage, right, or something like if there's something. Like exactly. A tip or something.
I think you do that quarterly too, right? So quarterly off of closed deals, I think is an easy way to track that. So you have 3-month increments.
So talking about the SDR role in general, specifically about the training of an SDR and the craft behind it. And you've done training, right? What were those companies that you work for, or sort of like, what is the good SDR training per se that you would recommend? Should it be like more like a shadowing of a more senior SDR or AE, or it will be a structured like 2 weeks boot camp and then sort of like just grinding books and then doing the practice? I'm currently working on internal training program, and it's different, right? So can you give an example of what training you had and what the training should be focusing on, or more developing like soft skills or hard skills, and any examples of any sort of like books or courses of anything that a person can actually check out and refine their SDR skill basically?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think When I became an SDR initially, there wasn't much training, right? So I think in a lot of the companies I've been at, there's actually not been that much training around how to get after it. And that's from every startup I've worked for to the bigger companies I've worked for, SAP. I mean, there's still like no real structured training around. They teach you, compliance, how to not get in trouble, make sure that everybody is, that you're not supposed to do certain things. And then you just kind of get on the phones. And I think, Outreach is actually a really good example of a company that's putting together a good training program. When I was there, we had like a boot camp week, kind of got into the specifics. They gave us all the resources, scripts, information about who we were supposed to target, how we were talking to them. I think that was really good. But I think training for an SDR realistically should be more, on a deeper level than that, right? Because what we're asking them to do is to become an expert in a brand new industry that they've probably never talked to a single person. It's their first job out of college or university, or they're transitioning from a different industry completely. We give them 1 week and we tell them to be, okay, you're the expert now, go. And that just, it doesn't cut it for most of the goals that I think we're trying to hit at a more strategic level. So, for me, like an ultimate plan would be, first month, the culture of the company, really dig in on the why behind what we're doing, assign them, information on, top level case studies that we have, like how we won deals, and really start getting into the nitty gritty of that. So they understand like, okay, this is the fundamental of the product. This is what I need to be an expert on. From there, I think, outside of development, I think reading and books, I think if you try to schedule people to read those as curriculum, a lot of people don't like that because they think they're in school again, right? So they're like, I don't like to read. I had to read all these books in college. Like, I don't want to do it anymore. But if you suggest, so on my team, I suggested a couple of really good books. I think Above and Below the Line Selling, I think is really big because it's a lot different. I think it's a great book. Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willing. I think it's not really a sales book, but you can apply it to all aspects of your life, especially when it comes to sales. I think, having that ownership of self and self-discipline is right there. There it is. That's my top book to just kind of, rule yourself, right? Because it's huge in this role. It's absolutely huge. And so I think those two books kind of help, kickstart people. I think like Crucial Conversations is another really big book to read. It's what I kind of started, and How to Win Friends and Influence People, I mean, is also a really good, just like original book to help your sales mind go. And I think, telling or giving the option for these reps to check that out at your library or provide them the book if they want it is really big. And then through those first couple months of onboarding, they really get to immerse themselves in what the job is going to take, if that makes sense. So they're going to, they're going to understand the product. They're going to understand the mindset of you as a leader. Of course, like if you're a leader and you don't believe in extreme ownership, don't give them that book, right? Because it's not going to mesh with like what you're telling them to do. And so that's how I look at it. So the first month is just really getting to know them, understanding their whys, getting them to buy into the team, buy into like the industry. And then from there, we just work on culture. We work on culture with them, and we continue to do trainings, and we continue to, hold everybody accountable to what we're asking them to do. And if you can do all those things in the first 3 months of ramp, you'll have a team that will run through walls for you. 100% guaranteed. I saw that at Bodify when I was there. If I could have done a couple tweaks in my training, I definitely would have. Looking back, hindsight's 2020. But I think, if you really understand people's whys and what they're motivated by, and you align it to the company's mission, and you provide them the correct training through reading, cold call sessions, email sessions, being their number one, I mean, you'll win. And if you're an SDR and you find a manager like that, hold on for dear life, because there's not that many of them.
Yeah. I would just add two more things here. And I kind of 100% agree with you there. Another thing that I would definitely add is training on competitors and training on the product in general, where you dig deep, not just in what you offer, but how is it different from what others are offering, right? Very many companies have a very weak value proposition or not very tailored one. So very often they sort of like, there is no logical explanation of why this feature is there or there's no feature. But if you really work on your product and you really are open-minded to developing that product and always improving it, right? Then you would have answers why we have this and why we don't have, so that SDR can be not just smart with the pitch, but also how this pitch was designed, right? Or sort of like, because at the end of the day, I very often see, for example, like, I can, so I'm running an agency, appointment setting agency, right? And you can imagine there are so many companies out there that offer very similar value proposition, right? But there are so few of good ones, right? And one of the good ones that I'm not going to share the name, but the good one, right? They are very sales driven. So it means that they hire the best salespeople on the job. They pay a huge percentage of the monthly deal that those AEs are closing. However, they have a very poor delivery team, because at the end of the day, it's about budget allocation. So if their budget goes to sales, then something will be underpaid, right? And we as an organizations are very delivery oriented. So it means that we focus more on delivering the value to the customer and less into driving new sales, because our retention is our main revenue stream, for example, right? And in this way, sort of like, obviously when my SDRs are speaking to why these customers would need to work with us, they definitely need to tailor their pitch to this. And I explain this to them and explain saying that, like, for example, like, we have an office in Ukraine, right? And if we have an office in Ukraine, we are in disadvantage with our US competitor because they are only US based. So it means that if they have a very strong sales team, they're going to be using this towards your disadvantage because you are in Ukraine as an SDR. Yeah. But at the same time, if you say that we focus on delivery and our SDR have a huge retention rate for working for the company, like 3 to 5 years, they don't go anywhere. They are being in the business. They are like best of the best, like top one in Ukraine. It's a better competitive advantage than by just SC say that, hey, I am just a US based, right? Because that's sort of like not a competitive advantage. So kind of playing your strength and understanding this and analyzing your competitors and why this is done. I think that this is very important for every product, either you sell a CRM or you're in solar or whatever, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. I 100% agree with you. Understanding the product and the value behind it is huge, especially when you're competing. I think, across, when we're looking at like US based moving into Europe, and that's why a lot of companies don't even touch Europe until we can get an office there, because it is that competitive advantage. Like if you're not there, well, who would work with you? And there's so many different laws as well. Like the GDPR laws are so different that a lot of companies don't know how to, work through that. So I think you're 100% understanding your competition as an SDR is key, because everyone you call is using somebody already, right? And if they're not, like that's, I would say, few and far between. So I think those are really great, 2 great points. For sure.
Another point, just to add to this, is very often, SDRs don't see the result of their work a long way. So it means that when they start booking appointment and that appointment had a demo or an SAY, then that's it, right? They say like, okay, we work with other. But as far as I know, SDRs and when I talk to my team, they're really interested in understanding what's the impact of their work on the company, like how those deals convert, what are those customers, how we deliver value to those customers, and actually kind of see that the work that they've done, the customer that they brought to the company is like the top-notch customer for the company. And that's going to be a huge motivation for them, understanding that I generated this key client for the company that brings multi-million-dollar deal for us right now. And it's, if I didn't do my work, then we wouldn't have this account with us, right? And I know that very often AEs are not communicating this and the company management, and just kind of, appreciating the people that's starting on that, because everyone appreciate the AE who closed the deal, say, hey, John is the great AE, he closed that. But if Alex or Blake or Michael wouldn't deliver that appointment to John, then John wouldn't close that, right? So appreciating the whole team that started that is also important to kind of just in that actual educating like process for the SDR to be, the best in the game, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Celebrating wins is huge. Wins big and small for SDRs. I think you hit the nail on the head there. When SDRs, I think, feel disconnected a lot from the company. Right, they're just in their own little pocket doing their hard work, and they don't feel like they're recognized. And that's why for me, I put a lot of time in celebrating wins across the company, especially when Blake just booked Groupon or something like that. And I mean, that's a huge deal, right? And everyone should know that that's happening. So yeah, I think celebrating, I would say it's 50% of motivation for SDRs is celebrating those wins, especially because it's a hard job. So you got to celebrate when you can.
Yeah. What would you say the competition should look like? Because you have 10 SDRs in the team. They're all competing. They're all booking appointments. Is it typically a healthy competition among SDRs, or how wouldn't escalate that competition to the point where they say, okay, Blake is booking more calls because he's this and that, so on and so forth. So have you seen some unhealthy competitions in the SDR team in your path?
Yeah, I think I definitely see some unhealthy competition. I think a lot of it is it's all mental, right? As an SDR, when you're looking at somebody else's performance, you're already looking at it the wrong way. How I train is we are a team, right? And so I've been in cultures before where it's John shows up 2 hours early and steals all my marketing leads, and he's doing this, and it's like, no, he's not. He's probably not doing that. And if he is, he's going to get in trouble at some point. It's going to be found out. And so when you focus on other SDR's performance, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage, right? So I think as a manager or as a team member, right? Because every team member is their own leader and how they promote the team, right? Because we all have a goal to hit together. As a manager, I don't have a singular goal. I have a team goal. I have to get you guys there. And so if I have you guys fighting amongst each other, it damages my ability to get us through that wall. And so for me, setting up competition is more on an individual level of extra pay, right? So I like spiffs. If you hit X amount of goal, I think that gives everybody the chance to hit it, and as long as finance is okay with it, and then we're all good to go. So setting something up like that, and then rallying the team around that, and how do we get them excited to move forward with that and keep the competition lively? So I don't believe in setting up for me, goals against each other, who can get the most dials or who can do this. I don't like those type of goals because I think it sets people up to, salespeople. I love salespeople. I'm a salesperson. Everyone is. That most of the time we talk to, we're really good about turning things on and off and understanding how to play the game of spiffs and winning things. And I think that if you put people up against each other, sometimes the more mischievous SDRs can flip those switches to get ahead. So if you put a percentage goal in front of people at the end of the month to get extra money, they're going to be more excited to get there, and the competition will stay healthy. Where those daily goals or dial goals or meeting set, it kind of puts people in a weird mindset to compete against each other than to compete as one team. That's how I look at it. I think there's a million ways to do it. I don't think one's wrong or one's right. That's what I would prefer.
Should there be a team goal? For example, if we book 50 appointments this month as the team, this is what we all get. And we're going to collaborate closely to be able to hit that goal together, so that the strong SDRs can share their experience and their best practices with the more low-performing SDRs to be able to hit that common goal all together. Was that something that you practiced in the past? Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, we team celebrations. Hey, if we do this, if we can hit this at the end of the month, we're going out to a team dinner. We're going out to a big team happy hour on the company, or on me. It doesn't matter what we got to do to get there. And I think that really helps build collaboration. I think that's a great way to do it. Just like you said, to help the stronger SDRs share that knowledge to help, raise the rest of the
and don't feel that they're individualists, right? That don't feel that they are should be performing, I should perform 35 appointments and the other one behind me should get 5 or 10, right? Mm-hmm. It should be more hey, we all need to get 50, right? And I can do 1 or 2 more or 5 more, but I help my other guys to hit the same amount as I'm hitting, right? So exactly. Just to have that as a team. Okay. Awesome. Blake, so when you started an SDR and when you train your SDRs, what are the main mistakes that SDR usually do? So like top 5 mistakes that you would name that SDR do either in their work or in their emails or in their phones or whatever, just top 5 in your list right now for people that are listening to this. Like my SDR is going to be listening to this. So I want to know maybe they are doing some of those mistakes right now so they can just go ahead and just, cross them out from their list. Top 5 of your list.
But yeah, top 5 on my list. I think the number one is not asking questions. Being afraid to ask. I think a lot of people kind of dig into that and they're afraid to because they don't want to look. No one wants to look dumb, right? I think it's put it out there, right? So ask those questions. Get them out there. Please ask. Your manager will answer. Your teammates will answer. No one's going to think you're dumb. Ask the questions. I think that's the glaring one that I look at, and I'm just like, please just ask me. So asking questions, I think, is the biggest mistake that people don't do. They just don't do it. The second one is being afraid to pick up the phone and call. I think that's a big hurdle for a lot of SDRs to get over, is just picking the phone up. A lot of times it's just a challenging thing because you don't want to face that rejection. But that's the beautiful thing about being in sales development, is that you get to face it every day and come out with a smile. So, get on the phones, dial early, break your fear fast. That's going to be huge. Utilizing LinkedIn, utilizing it as a meeting booking platform and not an actual professional platform. I think that is something that is highly overlooked. LinkedIn should be a place where you connect with your prospects to learn from them, not ask them for things.
Right.
I think if you damage your professional reputation on LinkedIn, it will damage your career for years and years to come, because you're not going to get the connections that you would have if you would have used it to learn from your prospects instead of nagging them for a meeting because they won't respond to your email. I think that's one that's probably not talked about at all. Probably 1% in conversations, that damaging your LinkedIn could damage your future. So I think those are my top 3 that I see. I think the other 2 that I would say is collaborate internally. Like, make sure that you're asking your customer success for those gold nuggets they get out of happy customers that you can then leverage to talk to customers more effectively. Make sure that you're friends with marketing, that they're not against you. I think, a happy marriage with marketing and the marketers will help you in your career. So I think, just make sure that you're leveraging your internal resources. Don't just rely on the team. I think collaboration is huge. And as an SDR, most don't. So that's my 4th one. And then number 5 would be, number 5 is hard. I think it's probably clear lines of communication with your manager. Like, understand your expectations. Don't assume that, because you're not doing one thing that you're going to get in trouble. Just have open conversations with your manager. Make sure that you understand the expectations of what we're looking for. Because at the end of the day, regardless of the metrics you're doing on a daily basis or monthly basis, if you're hitting your goals, we're going to give you the freedom to exceed, and you're going to give you the freedom to grow. So just make sure that your expectations are aligned. I think those are the 5 top things that I think if you focus on in the beginning, it will set you up for a healthy career at the company and a really good promotion path, or if you want to stay there, a really good just long-term job that you'll be happy with.
Yeah, these are like major things that you definitely need to do in your career to be successful, right? So Blake, you on a side note, and maybe I should have asked this before, but I just crossed my mind right now. You work in an SDR for selling to small and mid-size, as well as then selling to enterprise, right? What is the difference in the approach that you would say was for you in terms of approaching those enterprise companies opposite to approaching the mid-size? Was it in terms of the technology that you used, or in the messaging, or there's no difference at all the way you approach this?
Yeah, I think messaging is huge, right? So, I think it's a difference between one-to-many messaging with smaller companies, right? Because it resonates with those buyers. One-to-many messaging, you can move fast on it, book the meetings you need to book, move, and get to where you need to go quickly. But as you grow in the company and the stakeholders are multiple, you have to really focus it on unsiloing the decision makers. which is a one-to-one message, right? So every decision maker in those larger companies is looking at your product or your potential fit to what is their pain. So talking to multiple people, having that one-to-one message, having a slower cycle to make sure everyone knows what's coming is definitely more difficult. So as I scaled from small business to enterprise in my career, ABM was just becoming a thing. Like personas was just becoming a thing. But luckily for me, working in, blessed to work in retail because I worked with a lot of different people from a lot of different walks of life, getting to sell them actually some pretty high-end products early on in my career. I understood the differences in how we had to sell to them. So I was able to continue to crush goals and tweak my messaging that really resonated with those decision makers. So as you go through, my biggest takeaway is, be thoughtful, don't be like everybody else, link things together that people wouldn't, with enterprise companies. And then with smaller businesses, just, get to the decision maker as quickly as possible, make a lot of phone calls, send a lot of emails out that would actually help them out and, get going.
These are great tips, Blake. Appreciate you. And by the way, a lot of insights that you shared are really fundamental and important. And you're digging deep into the things that really happen. So I really appreciate this. Because you're currently open for opportunities, right? I think that why don't we use this podcast for the people listening to this? Because I have a lot of executives and entrepreneurs and people that are actually scaling their sales team. And if you're open to hearing what they can offer you, why they don't do this, right? So can you share what are you looking for yourself right now in terms of any new opportunity? You wanted to run some SDR stream right now. You wanted to be more in an AE role. What is that you're looking for yourself right now? Again, if that's something that I can ask right now, we can discuss.
Yeah, absolutely. No, for me, my next opportunity, I'm looking, to get back into sales development. I love it. I've had the most fun in my career, leading teams, being strategic, understanding where we're going, understanding how to run through walls, creating the culture in the company so that the SDRs and the team builds the equity of everyone around them, not just themselves. So I'm looking to go back into, SDR leadership, to be a manager, possibly a director when it comes to that. In the role, I'm looking for startup to middle-sized business Series Bs. I think, so pre-funding to Series B is what I'm really excited to get back into. I think that's the most fun you can have in a company. And I'm really to knock goals out of the way and get to where we're going. So that's what I'm looking for. My next step is, pure sales development, hard work, being curious, understanding a new industry, and just having a lot of fun.
Yay. Guys, so I will attach Blake's LinkedIn page to the description. So please ping Blake if you match all of his requirements, and Blake can talk to you. Blake, listen, I appreciate you taking the time today. I had a lot of fun.
Awesome. It was a lot of fun. I appreciate being on it. I think, sales development and what you're doing to help the sales community is huge, man. So I really appreciate it. I've been listening to all the other podcasts you've done so far, and I really enjoyed them all. So I'm glad I was able to be here, and hopefully can make a big impact for SDRs listening to this to really help you understand, what's being looked at and what you should be doing, and to really level up your game, because you are the most important part of the company, because you are top of funnel, and that's what pays the bills.
Yeah. Amen. All right, man. I appreciate the time.